And I see that most of us got the memo about we're in plaid today. That's good. We're all going duck hunting afterwards, so we're all.
I was about to say it kind of looks like Paul and I got the same memo of what shirt to wear.
Y'all are very close. Yeah, y'all are much close. I actually have one that's close to what Paul has, so I almost wear that. I was told
I'm about 20 feet away from a closet full of plaid. Should I go grab one just to fit in?
It's up to you. It's up to you. And actually, I think Brian, move your hand, Brian. I think that's right. That is plaid. See, but he's British, so he had to put the sweater on there to, But I mean, I joke with my wife. I said, if this were a bigger operation, I would actually have a costume department, and they would pick out my outfits so I would not have the same, shirt. I actually went and looked at the previous videos to make sure I hadn't worn this shirt yet, because I don't want to wear the same shirt every week. That's not me. I'm not Steve from Blue's Clues, That's an American show, Brian. It's a kid show.
Thank you.
Guy wore a green and blue striped sweater every day. I mean, that was his costume on the show. So Anyway, but yeah. But I mean, it's funny. It's like I at least try to not wear the same exact shirt a couple of weeks in a row on this broadcast, in case anyone's paying attention, and no one probably is. I don't know. Anyway, that's the nonsense we talk about. What's up, Kirk?
I said we will now.
That's right. You're going to go back and watch your other videos. Well,
we're going to start a whole blog just on what is he wearing.
That's right. which will be more popular than the actual broadcast. Yes,
and then it'll be the who wore it better that follows up. And there's so many ways we could go here.
Hey, whatever it takes to make us go viral.
Hey, you're right.
I mean, I like to pretend that one day this will be incredibly popular. In like 50 years from now, people will find archives of these and watch them, and there'll be a whole analysis of Chris's glasses. There'll be a whole thread on the glasses I wore, and you remind me of the joke of the preacher who's the traveling preacher who's traveling around in the South, and he comes to this one area, and he sets up, like he does a traveling preaching thing. He sets up his tent and all that, and waits for people to come in. And one farmer is the only person sitting in the pews there. And the preacher says, "I'm sorry, I don't know whether I need to have a service today or not. There's only just one of us here." And the farmer says, "Well, if only one of my pigs comes to eat, I'll be sure to feed him." The preacher says, "All right." And he sat down and gave a real barn burner of a sermon, and he talked and talked and talked, and he got done. And he said to the old farmer, "So what do you think?" He says, "Well, if only one of my pigs show up to eat, I'll feed him, but I'm not going to force feed him the whole damn trough." We've got over 35 meetings, and I go back and pick like the top 10, and I did a little Facebook blurb of what do these have in common, and listed, like, to me the most impressive out of the I picked the top 10 out of 35 that sounded that would get people's interest going, right? And like the alchemy and other things. And it's like, we cover a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool esoteric stuff in this little old Zoom meeting that I manage. And I've gotten speakers on the most amazing things, and they've been great talks. Honestly, I'd take these presentations over most of the papers I've seen, even in a research lodge. I think for some reason, maybe because people can talk longer, I don't know, but it seems like going back and reading our research papers, they're all good, but they're kind of similar. It's like, let me talk about the history of the Civil War. Let me talk about the history of this lodge. It's good stuff, and it's better than no education at all. But, we talk about esoteric Masonry and getting into the really kind of fringy stuff that's like we're supposed to be about. We're getting into it here.
In some ways, you might be reaching more than you know. Like I've used several subjects from these calls for the education of my lodge. So,
okay.
It might be, and I do always mention that this is where I got it. So.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. The more people that we can invite, I don't know. I guess I want to know that I'm having an impact with the work I'm doing, because I'm doing this to get I'm doing this to get education in front of Masons, because the biggest complaint that I hear is that I go to lodge and all we do is talk about dinners, and we just do the minutes, and we talk about patching the roof, and I'm not getting anything. So if I'm filling a void in education, me and the speakers who do the heavy lifting, but me just being the vehicle to get them there. I mean, I'm writing my own papers, and I'm spending more time managing other people's papers than writing my own. So I got to be writing. I just finished one I just gave, but I feel like right now I'm more of an editor and a platform than a Masonic speaker. I'm very happy for our British half of the meeting, because you guys hold us up. You all keep us going. But I wish, what happened to our brother Buck? What happened to him, right?
Is that who? Sorry,
John Buck, Alan Buck.
Alan Buck.
From the Isle of Man.
Oh, right, yes.
Yeah.
He's still in my groups. He doesn't seem to contribute much now. He seems to be, doing real masonry, I guess you would say.
Oh, I get that. See, we were just a temporary fix for him.
Exactly. Yeah.
He's off the methadone and back on the actual heroin now. Okay, I get it. we are. That's right. My Zoom meetings are the methadone clinic of masonry. When you can't get the real stuff.
The methadone of masonry. I'm going to steal that one from you, brother, if I may.
Please.
With that analogy, you might want to just drop the mic and walk out.
I know, I'm done.
Zoom meetings are the methadone of Freemasonry. I love that.
And I'll probably leave all that in too. That's the fun. And by the way, do any of you go and watch the videos? Like, if you missed them, do you watch the whole hour and a half, 2 hours? I want to know if anybody of you actually.
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
You want to watch the whole thing? Okay.
And I give it a thumbs up.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it. Please. Oh, yes. If you're watching us on YouTube right now, please like and subscribe. I always forget to. I put the little tag. I got that little Mozart clip with the tree, at the beginning and the end. That's like my theme music for us. I always have the please like and subscribe at the very end, but I forget to say it during the video. I understand the formula. I just think it came along too late for me to jump on board. So I'm using it in a different way. I'm not looking to be famous or rich off of this. I'm looking to spread Masonic education by doing this. So my target audience, if I reach them, great, but I'm not going to get 1 million Masonic subscribers. Maybe I can. I don't know. Maybe I need to start doing shorter clips, and that'll draw more people. I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen. So again, David, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, they'll say, and it was within a year that Chris hit upon the perfect formula and became the huge phenomenon that we all know him for. Honestly, I'd rather edit a paper, because I can edit a paper in like half an hour and clean it up and re-release it. And I've had to do that. I've had to cut papers down for time. But a YouTube video, you have to watch it, and then you rewind, and then you have to line up just the right clip so you're not, I don't know. I think I would like to do that. And honestly, Lee, I think, weren't you one who was asking me about length of videos, length of talks?
Yes.
Okay,
I get very... Yes. Because I say from my preaching career, I remember a bishop said to me once, he said a sermon should be about God in about 8 minutes.
Yes. I'm analyzing Masonic papers in education and how, what works, what doesn't. I'm always constantly thinking about it and trying to improve the process. If you go into a lodge and you talk for 10, 15 minutes tops, you'll keep the audience. Unless you really have a riveting topic, if you talk for 20 minutes in a lodge, you're going to start losing people. So I get that. Here, it's a different form. We're all sitting back. We're comfortable. Most of us have a drink. We're more forgiving, and you can get more into the weeds. And not every lodge has visual presentation. Not every lodge has a projector, although I imagine more do now than 5 years ago, I guess. But you can do a more relaxed setting, and there's much more interaction than in a lodge, right? Even in research lodges, we ask for questions. Very rarely do people actually engage. Here, people do. So you could talk for a half an hour. I need to go back and do the metrics and look at every single talk and see how long they were and get an idea of how long they should be. I'd like to get to a point where I can say, okay, Paul, you're ready to give a talk. you should keep it to 20 minutes to 30. You know what I mean? And maybe I need to get speakers who will talk shorter and do like a 10, 15-minute talk with Q&A and release those.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
and I think it's the Q&A. I mean, I think you all know. I mean, and I am a teacher by profession, right? And of course, a lesson, a class, lasts 45 minutes or an hour, depending on the school or the university or whatever. But it's not that you actually talk at the people for 45 minutes, right? You walk in, you give a 10, 15-minute exposition of something, and then you begin interacting with your students. And that's how you educate. That's how you teach. It's not, people don't really like listening to hour-long lectures, I don't think.
No.
Really do that.
Yeah,
But now,
if I chime in here, many of you don't know me and my background, but I'm an educator as well. I teach chemistry at university, and so I'm the guy that nobody wants to listen to. But I agree with what Lee was saying.
Here, so we're coming equal.
Yeah. But I agree completely with what Lee was saying, and I think back to quite a few years ago when the TED Talks started becoming popular.
Right.
And I don't know if I remember the exact number, but if I remember correctly, those TED Talks were expected to be 17 minutes long, and they were timed very, very closely. And because someone had done the research that 17 minutes was the ideal attention span, that after 17 minutes, you start losing your audience. And again, it might be 18, I might be off by a minute or so, but it was in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And so as a teacher, when I learned that, when I started watching the TED Talks, it changed how I approached my classes. And I, kind of like Lee was saying, I go every 15 minutes, there's got to be something that breaks up the class. You got to change what you're doing or whatever. Because like I said, I teach classes that are an hour and a half long. And, you can't hold anybody's interest for an hour and a half. I don't care how good of a speaker you are.
Right. Well, I will say that the longest paper I think we had with the actual paper was Brother Gomez talking about Freemasonry in Cuba. But he gave the whole history and all of the military people and the government people who were involved in starting the Grand Lodge of Cuba and all. And that was all fascinating in and of itself. And that was at least 45 minutes. And then he talked about his personal visit to Cuba and attending lodge there. And he talked for another 15 minutes to sort of, here's what I did, and about meeting people and going out. And that was still, so he talked for a good hour before we got to Q&A, but it held everybody's attention.
But I think
And that's
Moses
the
is
exception.
I think Moses is an anomaly, though. I mean, if you
Yeah,
know
if you
him,
know-
I mean, I've met him on many occasions and hung out with him and whatever, and he's just an engaging human being. It's just, I don't know what it is about him, but he holds an audience, because I've done the same thing. I've seen him speak for 45 minutes to an hour, and he never loses a person in the audience. So I think he's an anomaly.
Welcome, everyone. This is Virginia Research Lodge, number 1777's bi-weekly Zoom unstated meeting. I want to welcome everyone. That's probably the longest time we spent before we got to the actual meat of it, let alone getting to the speaker, who we will, I promise we'll get to shortly. In our chat, you will see a link to our Facebook page. If you're not already a member, please join us on Facebook. You will see our research papers there, and this and other Zoom meetings and YouTube meetings will be listed. Next is our Research Lodge website, where I just recently updated all of the lodge meetings for all the research lodges in Virginia when they meet over the course of the 2023. So if you want to go visit us or any other research lodge, that's listed there, as well as all of our papers. And then our YouTube channel, where I talk about, and this is one of the many unstated meetings we're going to put online. And finally, my email address, if you're not on Facebook, I'd rather you connect to me on Facebook, but if you want to just email me to get added to a research paper list, please do so. All right, I'm going to go and turn it over to Brother Jason Hicks, who will introduce himself and tell us what he's a member of, whatever he needs to, and he'll go ahead with his talk. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, thank you, and thank you for what you do with this. This is quite an undertaking, and has been quite an undertaking for a couple of years now. So thank you for that. I've spoken here once before. I think it was back in 2020, maybe 2021. I can't remember. So I am my home lodge is Cookeville, Tennessee. I'm now past master there. I'm now in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm a member of just about everything that exists. I won't bore you with the details, as I know many of you are members of a great many things too. I get reminded of everything I'm a member of at dues paying season. My wife particularly enjoys dues paying season. So the presentation today, I was not aware of this individual until I'll go through the story here in a second, but the John Raymond Shute Jr. And he was, I call him an innovator of modern masonry. So I'm sure everybody's heard of the Allied Masonic Degrees, Knight Masons, or the Grand College of Rites. But does anybody know what they all share? Which is a founder amongst a group of people, but a founder amongst all of them. And that's John Raymond Shute Jr., or as he's also sometimes known as J. Ray Shute. And I was at Grand Masonic Week in DC back in 2019, and I was talking to some guys, and they said, you need to look up Raymond Shute. I said, well, who was he? They said, you just need to look him up. They said, no, hardly anybody's ever heard of him, but he did more to develop our fraternity to where we are today than anybody else. So with that little nugget that they gave me, I was very curious. And so I started looking into him, and I'll go through his background first, and then we'll kind of get into some of the bodies that he created. And then I've got some other stuff to share at the end. He worked, frankly, I think almost as hard or harder than anybody else in the fraternity, definitely in his era, but arguably through today. The Grand College of Rites is basically the collection point for a lot of dead or lost degrees. But he traveled the world, traveled the world to find folks who were members of certain degrees that were arguably going to be lost otherwise. And because of that, I mean, he was able to preserve a lot of the degrees that are housed in the Grand College of Rites now, personally. And so that involved him being initiated and then ultimately taking possession of those degrees, then launching them at the Grand College of Rites. I will give a plug for the Grand College of Rites publishes these every year. If you're a member, you get it sent to you. If you're a member, you can order other ones from previous years. Grand College of Rites has a great website, but you can find this stuff on their website along with a list, very interesting list of all of the degrees that they are owners of. My wife always jokes with how many degrees I have, and then you get into the looking at the Egyptian Masonic rite of Memphis, and you talk about something that really goes off the rails. I think there's like 84 degrees in it, but all interesting. I've got a whole pile. While we were talking earlier, I went over to my bookshelf and grabbed off the pile of those that I've got, and I don't nearly have all of them. But every year they put out a degree. I think I saw something recently where you can order some of the older ones in a much bigger bound version. So that's interesting. I mean, it's all right. I find reading ritual interesting. Some people would probably find that boring, but I find it interesting. But that was one of the things he did. All of this work was done in the 20s and the 30s. When you consider everything he was doing, researching these degrees, corresponding with folks all over the world, he didn't have the pleasures like we have of getting on a Zoom meeting like this, having the internet. The amount of labor that it took to research these bodies, figure out who's a member of these bodies, and then to be able to put it in place to be able to become initiated in some of these bodies is just impressive. But let me go through some of his biography. So he was born in Monroe, North Carolina. lived there his whole life. Educated in the schools there, went to Georgia Military Academy, attended Trinity College in Durham, and later received a master's degree from Atlantic University. He was a businessman with J.R. Shute Company, Shute Motors, United Airways in North Carolina, Monroe Investment Company, Union Aircraft, Union Broadcasting, Union Laundry, Shute Wilson Gin Company, Ellen Fitzgerald Hospital, Finance Corporation of America, and a number of other businesses. The guy was busy, not just in Masonry, but pretty much in all aspects of his life. He was a community leader, president of Chamber of Commerce, president of the Lions Club, Duke Alumni Association, served as mayor, president of the League of Municipalities, state director of the Federal Office of Price Stabilization. Goes on to do a number of other organizations, served in the North Carolina State Senate in the 30s, and ultimately edited, lectured, and authored 20 published books. I'll go ahead and apologize. I am trying my darndest not to get sick, but when you have to talk for a little while, your voice goes out a little bit. And ultimately, he left Masonry in the late 40s, early 50s. Didn't come back Masonry until the 80s. Never spoke publicly on why he left, all the way up until the time he died. And nobody ever talked publicly who knew him either about why he left. But he died in 1988, 2 years after he became reaffiliated with the lodge. As far as his Masonic career, he was a member of Monroe Lodge 244. He established the North Carolina Lodge of Research, which, to the best as I can tell, was one of the earliest lodges of research in the country. Started in the 20s. It went dark in the 60s. And North Carolina still to this day does not have a lodge of research, which I think is a little bit interesting.
And what's the number? What's the number of that lodge? 666.
Yeah.
That's why I remember it. I don't know if what meaning that has, or if that was why it eventually went dark. I don't know, but that's of note.
Yeah. I didn't have it listed, but as soon as you said it, I remembered it. And he served as the Grand Historian of North Carolina, received North Carolina's George Montforth Medal in 1949. I went through his papers that are housed at the University of North Carolina's library, and no clues in there either for why he left Masonry. It was very odd. But so between 1931 and the beginning of World War II, his word is he was involved in a beehive of activity. And there were a number of other Masons across North Carolina that were involved and across the country. But he felt like every Masonic body that existed ought to have an existence in North Carolina. Every appendant body. And so he starts to the introduction of Allied Masonic Degrees, the Priestly Order of the Temple, the Ninth Masons of Ireland, the Irish Royal Arch, Knights Beneficent of the Holy City, and others, where they needed to be formed in need of the governing body. They've in turn formed a governing body. They worked to try to find dead rights and house them in the Grand College of Rights. And then they also started putting out this publication right here, as well as the Miscellanea, which is published by AMD as a research item as well. Lodge 666 also had a transactions called Noclore, which published their transactions as well. And he personally edited a number of these publications himself, which again, I can only imagine having to edit all these things, but back in that day when you didn't have a computer and, it couldn't just print things out and do things quite as quickly as you can today. He was a member of the International League of Freemasons in Geneva, Switzerland. And as it came out later, the members of that league were all being closely watched on Hitler's blacklist because of the history of Freemasonry and what Freemasonry has done throughout the world. So, his history is so remarkable. And when you think of the era and the time that it existed, is even more remarkable than that. So the North Carolina research started in 1931, as Brother Douglas referred to. It was Lodge number 666. And it was the first lodge of research created in the United States, which, mind you, that now, most every state has at least one lodge of research today. So the North Carolina Lodge of Research started in 1931, and there were 20 founders as required to start a new lodge under North Carolina Masonic Code. And mind you, all this is starting during the Great Depression. This isn't starting in a time where there's a lot of prosperous other things going on. I mean, this is a very rough time as far as history goes. But it goes on. It publishes the No Chlor for a great deal of time. You can find reprints of that online. I don't personally have any of them, but I found some online, and some claim to be originals. I don't really know that whether that exists or not. But in 1954, it closed, which is quite unfortunate, considering that it was the original lodge of research in this country. The second organization was the Grand College of Right, started in 1932. So again, back to back, starting these pretty weighty, large Masonic bodies. And starts in 1931 with J. Raymond Shute, Harold Voris from New Jersey. If anybody knows their Masonic history, that's another name of somebody who was involved in a great number of things. And Henry Parcell of New York, who is the surviving member of the defunct Egyptian Rite of Memphis in the United States. And after corresponding back and forth, Brother Parcell agrees to to confer on Brother Shute and Voris the Egyptian Rite of Memphis degrees. And those degrees were obtained simultaneously at the creation of the Grand College of Rites. So a not quite exhaustive list of the degrees that have been featured in the yearly publication is the Swedenborgian Rite, Frates Lucis. I'm going to butcher some of these names. I'm sorry. The Rite of Adoption, the Martinist Order, the Adirondack Rite, the Rite of Memphis, the Ancient Order of Zuzamites, Queen of the South, Order of the Palm and Shell, Free and Accepted Architects, the Rite of Mizram, the Hermetic Rite, the Order of Druids, the Fiery Heart. So there's still about 5 more lines of degrees that I can't even pronounce some of these. But ultimately, all of these are acquired in these different ways. And this goes back to what their ultimate duty was really in their founding was to have a place to put all these. And he did this because he wanted to make sure that these were preserved and not ripped off in some other way. And so originally they had a limit of 100 members. And so ultimately in 1948, that number got lifted. And I'm not sure how many members there are today, but suffice to say it is far more than 100 based on the work that they do. This is another one of those show of hands. How many folks have gone to a Grand Masonic Week in Washington, D.C.? Anybody? Okay, this is one of the organizations that meets during Grand Masonic Week in Washington, D.C. If you've never been, I would highly commend going to Grand Masonic Week. It is a fantastic experience. So Grand College of Rites still in existence today, still does great work. Basically, again, its primary purpose is to be a house for these dead degrees or dead degree systems, and put out a book every year on one of those to republish. There was one, there was a special COVID edition from back in 2021. It got published, and it was the burlesque degrees. I'll just say, there's many things I've seen in lodges. Burlesque degrees were not anything that I'd ever thought of with the number of Masons that I've ever met through the years. But that was a interesting read, to say the least. So moving on, the Society of Blue Friars. Has anybody ever heard of the Society of Blue Friars? So we got Chris's head shake. Society of Blue Friars is another organization that only meets during Grand Masonic Week in DC. And it was created to honor those who are, as it said, is toiling in the Masonic research fields. Its membership is restricted. And the head of the body is known as the Grand Abbot. But it is a very, very small group. It can only have 20 members at any given time. And if you look on their website, you would see the 20 members and you go, yeah, I've heard of all 20 of those people. Because they are some of the most well-published and well-regarded folks in the fraternity. But it's another very select and small group, but is there to honor those that have really worked exceptionally hard in the fraternity. Next organization, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of, Knights of York Cross of Honor, KYCH. So one of his goals of the Innovators, this group that he was a part of that was trying to kind of move the fraternity along with doing all these things, was honoring those who have made outstanding contributions to the York Rite. And so part of this was the creation of the KYCH. And so if you don't know that, the KYCH is you've been worshipful master of a lodge, high priest of a Royal Arch chapter, illustrious master of a council of royal and select masters, and commander of a commandery. And so most each of these states has what they call an asylum of them. And the person that is head of this is Grand Master General. So KYCH also meets during Grand Masonic Week, but it's purely a body to honor those who have served in those roles, or if you've served as a grand body, there's Knights York Grand Cross of Honor. So,
Jason, if I could interject, in Virginia and West Virginia, I imagine, in Virginia and West Virginia, we do not have the council degrees. They are part of the chapter. So we have, I don't know how active you are in the York. Well, you're new to North Carolina, aren't you? We asked brothers from North Carolina to come, I guess, to Grand Chapter and confer the most excellent master degree because we don't confer it. But if you join the Royal Arch, chapter in Virginia and West Virginia, you get the Royal Master and Select Master on the way to getting the Royal Arch. So we have 6 degrees. So the KYCH in Virginia, and I assume West Virginia, I haven't been there, but I'm assuming that, you only have to be a past master, past high priest, and past commander. So, but still, it's a limited group.
Yeah.
It is a limited group. And they're very active in our area. They have what we call the pony rope, which is the red, white, and blue cord that they wear as a member. And I know quite a few brothers who have belonged to that. And trying to be head of 4 different bodies, that's even more impressive. And that's how most of the country is. So I just want to interject that.
Yeah, I made a joke after I was commander and got my KYCH about how I would never have to go through the chairs again. And then karma kind of bit me, and then I moved, and then I got married, and my wife had to move back to North Carolina. And I said, "Oh well, guess I'll have to do all that all over again." But that's what happens when you make fine declaratory statements like that. But that's very interesting. I didn't realize that Virginia did not have the council. That's very fascinating.
I have a paper I wrote on the Royal and Select Masters. I'll share with you. I actually gave it. We have a Virginia Research Royal Arch chapter I'm a member of that actually meets here in Virginia Beach. So it's close to me, and I rarely go. Go figure. But I make it to Richmond 4 times a year for our lodge. But I gave a presentation when they were doing online meetings on I wrote a paper on Royal and Select Master, and because how it varies from place to place. Well, so to give away the one question, whenever I tell people to write a paper, it's like people ask me, how do I go about writing a research paper? How do I get started? And I say, find a question that you would ask about Masonry that you want an answer to, and go write a paper and do the research to answer that question for yourself. And one of my questions was, why does Virginia and West Virginia not have the council as a separate council? And I looked into how those 3 different degrees originated and everything else. And the short answer is, and I'll spoiler, they just decided not to. And they just said, we'll keep the Royal and Select Master and we'll put them into the chapter and forget about the Super Excellent Master. And because now some who know Virginia history will already know the answer to this. Why does West Virginia do what Virginia does? Because at the time it was before the Civil War, and Virginia and West Virginia were one big happy state when we were founded, when we became a Grand Lodge. And during the War of Northern Aggression, as we like to call it down here, 13 counties, whatever it is in West Virginia, said, nope, we want to stick with the Union, and broke off, which means they had to form their own Grand Lodge and Grand Chapter. So basically, because Virginia had already established what a chapter was, West Virginia took that on. That's the only reason they're the same we are. So we decided to. Anyway, just a slight detour from your talk, but that's I'm fat, and I'll send you a link to the paper. You can go and watch it on YouTube. I think we put it on YouTube. But it's the whole idea of the Royal and Select Master always fascinates me, and how the council degrees are everywhere else but not here, and we just do Royal Arch a little different, York Rite a little differently in this state. So
yeah, no,
that's always been fascinating to me.
I'll say too that KYCH was created in 1930. So again, we're looking at basically 1930, 1931, 1932. So also in 1931, Brother Shute was part of starting the Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priest. Is anybody a member of that? It's pretty select. Each tabernacle is limited to 33 members. According to their information, the Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priest is an honorary and invitational organization with membership limitations that cannot be applied for, based on outstanding performance as a commander of a commandery of Knights Templar. Its historical roots date back to England, and it's a priestly order, and also stretches back to Ireland. As well. The Grand College of America Holy Royal Arch Knight Templar Priest was formed in 1931. Each tabernacle is limited to 33 members, and the number of tabernacles in a state is dependent on the number of active commanderies in the state. So,
Hey, Jason, we have a KTP, what did you call it? Tabernacle?
Yeah.
We have a KTP that meets when our research lodge meets in December and May. They move their meeting to follow us. So they're at the same building we are. And most of them, some actually come for our meeting, stay through lunch. Most of them show up at lunchtime. And several of our members stick around because they're in the KTP as well. I'm not a past commander, so I was never anything. I'm not even eligible for it, but I know very little about it. But I always like to tease them. It's like, well, if y'all would just show up at 10 o'clock instead of 12, you could attend our meeting and then go, because we're literally in the same building. And then there's an AMD that only meets once a year that meets after them in December. So it's a very busy day for Babcock when we meet, but I know them only because they're like our neighbors on those 2 dates. So, but I'm somewhat familiar with them, but all I know is they're past commanders. I know very little to them besides that. Are they a research body of any kind, or what? I mean, what's their deal? Did you know?
I'm not a member. I do not really know. A good friend of mine from Tennessee was their grand preceptor last year. Just finished out his term at Grand Masonic Week. But I've never really, I don't believe they're a research body. There's some of these other bodies that are out there that are research bodies, but that's not one that I've ever heard of being a research body as well. So I think it's just purely kind of an honorary thing, and they, sit around and look at the 32 other people that are sitting in the room that happens to be the members. Unfortunately, not many states are growing commanderies, so the number of tabernacles probably is not to a point that it's ever going to grow beyond what they are right now, unfortunately. So Allied Masonic Degrees, this is another this is a body that a lot more folks have heard of. It was established also in 1932. So again, a whole lot of work being done in a very compressed, short amount of time here, as he referred to it as the beehive of activity. So the purposes of the Allied Masonic Degrees are beneficial to all aspects of Masonry, whether they be symbolic, York, or Scottish. And they control the number of degrees by incontestable authority, but they're primarily not a degree working organization, as any member of the AMD knows. They house certain degrees, and I've got a ritual book somewhere over on the other side of the room. They have a number of degrees. If you go to Grand Masonic Week, they actually offer, I think it's either 2 or 3 of the degrees there during the week. And so you can actually take some of the degrees, specifically. Let me see if I can pull up the itinerary that somebody posted. There are a couple degrees. The Royal Ark Mariner, Worshipful Commander Noah, Order of the Secret Monitor, Installed Supreme Ruler, are all degrees that are available during Masonic Week for a member of the AMD. So, but it's primarily a research body. As I referred to earlier, they have a book. I call it a book. They have a publication that they put out each year that is of research papers that they have chosen to highlight. Most, if not all, jurisdictions in the United States have this appendant body there. In the 20s and the early 30s, Shute led a Masonic study group on Sunday afternoons who met in either at the Masonic Temple or at his house. And they talked about different Masonic degrees, other things that were going on in the fraternity. And ultimately, this is what led to the AMD. And so it's a body that, you know, is one of, frankly, I think the most successful out of the bodies that he was involved in creating, and has done a lot to further Masonic research. As I mentioned, it does meet during Grand Masonic Week as well. And he was one of the first officers in the in it. Again, just like the Grand College of Rites, him and some other brothers travel to different parts of the country and the world to obtain the degrees that ultimately they got possession of. So, you know, when you start factoring in how much that cost, this activity gets fairly expensive fairly fast. Another organization started in 1934, the Knights Beneficent of the Holy City. It has a much longer Latin name. I practice law, but I do not speak Latin. So I will not embarrass myself with trying to pronounce its Latin name. But this is another organization had to travel to start to get the initial degrees. They conferred 8 degrees. Well, I'm sorry, 6 degrees after the initial 3 in Masonry. And so they had to travel to Switzerland to get these degrees. And this is not an organization I'm very familiar with at all. And so I thought this was pretty interesting too. So Shute was born, all the things that I just mentioned, he did before he was 33 years old. So, you know, I kind of read that, and I was about 34, 35 when I was doing this, and I was like, man, he was really setting the world on fire. I mean, it's just amazing what he was able to do. So 1936.
I've been slacking.
Yeah. Well, from what I can tell, Shute must have had a fantastic bank account to be able to afford to do all these things too. So most folks have heard of Night Masons. Another one of the more widely founded bodies that he was a part of. Perpetuates the ancient rituals of the Irish Masonic canon, the Green Degrees. And that started in 1936. And a group of them went to Ireland to get those degrees to be able to bring them back to the United States. And like, as I said, that's probably one of the most, along with probably AMD, probably one of the most successful organizations that he founded as far as membership today. And it's actually, if you're not a member of it, you know, it's actually a degree grading body. It's not necessarily a research body. But so, in conclusion, to kind of wrap it all up, Shute, when you look at the things that are going on today in the fraternity and the bodies that are here, he was responsible for a vast majority of these appendant bodies, especially that kind of form off the York Rite. He had a vision, and him, along with these other men who are known as the Innovators, really took what they were wanting to do and really went with it. It is so amazing to think of what they were able to accomplish and put together without technology. And in a period of time where, you know, our country was fighting through a depression. You know, so, you know, it nationally, you know, historically at the time, you know, this was kind of the period of time where, you know, America was kind of looking inward and not outward. And, you know, you've got Shute and some of these other guys traveling all over the world to kind of be ambassadors for the fraternity to be able to bring things back. So, you know, he was relentless in his research. chasing down many loose ends to try to figure out how to connect the dots. And you know, a lot of these organizations he had to go personally be initiated in to be able to get the degrees, to be able to bring them back and things like that. So, you know, he really was so active. But, you know, I look around today and I look at, you know, my own Masonic career and the organizations that I'm in. So much of what he did, I'm a beneficiary of today. Like a lot of us are beneficiaries. So, you know, I think he's somebody that definitely we don't talk about enough, but he's somebody that our fraternity owes a great deal to. So as I mentioned, the Grand College of Rights, that's the end of my formal presentation. As I said, this is the publication of the Grand College of Rights. I definitely commend the Grand College of Rights. I think membership's like $10 a year.
I'm sorry, Jason, can you, and thank brilliant speech. I really enjoyed that. Can you tell me what the Grand College of Rights really is? I try to get that from what you were explaining it, but.
So literally it exists solely to be a repository of dead degrees.
Okay. All right then.
And that is literally its existence. And so they meet once a year at Grand Masonic Week in DC, and this is the publication. But for $10, pretty sure it's $10 a year. You're in to get their publication. And so it's super interesting to read some of these old degree systems. And they've got a list on the website of all the old publications that they've got that are for sale. And I would highly recommend that to you. When you join. I know this is the Virginia Lodge of Research, but I'll plug the Tennessee Lodge of Research, of which I'm a past master of. Meets 4 times a year. Next meeting is the first weekend in March. And they move about the state. First meeting of the year is in West Tennessee. Second meeting of the year is in Middle Tennessee. Third meeting of the year is in East Tennessee. And then the fourth meeting of the year is back again in Middle Tennessee. We just published our volume 2 of our Traveling East, which is a collection of papers for 2006 to 2015. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any place you buy books. This is volume 2. Volume 1 is out of publication now, but we are reworking it and going to be putting it back out there. And it's from the founding in 86 through 2005. So 20 years of papers there. So it was my personal.
Are you still involved with the Research Lodge in Tennessee? Because remember you asked me to come out and speak one year and I couldn't. But you're living in North Carolina now.
I'm still a member. I'm a fellow.
Do you still attend then?
No, not really.
Okay.
I'll probably make it back. I can make it back probably reliably about 1 meeting a year at this point. I've also got an almost 11-month-old at home, so my leash got a whole lot smaller when he came along to go to meetings, especially
that
out of state meetings.
Happens. So whereabouts do you live in North Carolina now?
Greensboro.
Okay.
Pretty much smack dab right in the middle.
Okay. Well, would you consider coming up and visiting us at up in Richmond for Virginia Research sometime? That would be great. Okay. Definitely. I had made plans to come out there. You actually asked me to come and be the speaker I like the fact that your research lodge in Tennessee moves around, and the one that's in Johnson City, basically, Johnson City. That's close enough to Virginia. It's still probably like an 8-hour drive for me, but I was trying to engineer a way to go out there and maybe bring some brothers with me. But it was the same weekend as a big DMLA event for my son, so we went to that. That's actually in Maytuck. We went up to Pennsylvania for a big ritual, like a multi-state ritual competition. But they won, so it was worth going to that. So
It was definitely worth it. No, it's it took us a while to get this book together, and now we are trying to do it. If you remember the Tennessee Lodge of Research, it's another. The membership fee is only $10, and out-of-state members are allowed in. You'll get a paper copy of the proceedings. Wish I had one nearby. They're over on the other side of the room on my bookshelf. But about a year afterwards, you get a copy of all the papers that were presented that year, if you remember. So it's just purely for getting the papers alone. It's worth the price of admission.
Definitely. Any brothers? I really did enjoy that talk. I've heard it's nice to hear a paper on something. I mean, it's really cool to hear something I don't know anything about, and it like alchemy. And I'm like, wow, it blows my mind because it's all new information. But it's also interesting to see the intersections where you're speaking on a topic that I'm already familiar with from other papers and other things I've been reading about. So I really do appreciate that. And it was very informative. Any brother have any questions? I got several questions, but I don't want to dominate the floor here. Any brother have any questions, brother?
Well, I was
Hicks?
thinking maybe the gentleman, the brother Shute, he had done so much in the beginning that maybe why he got out of Masonry, everything else he had to take care of too in his life, so to speak.
Maybe.
If he got that, it sounds like from 31 to 36, he was rather busy in the fraternity.
Yep.
And that's been one of the theories I've heard. I've also heard it was a personality conflict with some other folks that were in power. God knows that never happened.
Unimaginable. Not in
Really?
Masonry.
So
I'd say more, but this is a public venue.
Yeah. So I mean, honestly, any number of those theories could be right. I mean, it was right around the same time he was serving as a mayor, and then went on to serve in the state senate. So not surprising that other things would have been dominating his life at that point. But it is kind of, I am glad that he did come back in the fold towards the end of his life. Since Masonry had been so much a part of his life, I am glad that he did come back in the fold later. But it is kind of a mystery. And I was hoping that his papers at the UNC library would have some clue buried somewhere. But I spent about a day going through all the boxes that comprise his papers and couldn't find any clues. It did, interestingly enough, have a number of his membership cards in his papers, which I thought was funny. But
what else are you doing?
North Carolina and not at Duke, because Trinity College was Duke came from Trinity College. So It's interesting that it's not at Duke and UNC because they're a hated rivalry. I know.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm from Danville, Virginia, so I know exactly about that there. So yeah, it was very interesting.
Oh, Brother David, I just saw your question in the chat.
Oh,
about the esoteric book. That is not this book. That is a book that was specifically an ebook specifically put together by the request of Grandmaster Casey Hood when he was Grandmaster, to have something out there to give younger Masons to kind of put a lot of the esoteric together so they could refer to it in one place.
Yeah.
So that's also available on our website. Also available is there was an 1820s Masonic manual that was put out that recently got digitized, and we put that out on the membership area of our website as well.
If you like, Jason, when we're all done, if you want to go to our Facebook group and make a link to the website, that would be great.
I can do
Um,
that.
I want to bring up the Martinists. Was that one of the groups that he started a chapter in?
I've never seen a reference to that one.
Because you read that off when you were listing a bunch of things like the Blue Friars and other things.
Oh, so that was probably the list of that was part of the list of the degrees that the Grand College of Rights is owner of.
Okay. Because so it's a degree. Okay. Because the Martinists, and in fact, I have a brother who's going to give a talk here, Brother John Meek, who lives in Bulgaria, I think. I'm going to see if he wants to give a talk on that or line me up with someone. The Martinists are, and if anyone here is either, they'll get mad at me that I'm comparing them, but the Martinists are like the Rosicrucians in a sense, in that they intersect with Masonry in a very vague sort of way, but they're not. Martinists are not Masons. Masons are Martinists, but some belong to both. And I think that's one of the things I want to find a speaker. I mean, there's some topics where I'm trying to find speakers. Like I find you as a speaker, and then you tell me, okay, I can do A, B, or C, and I say B looks good, do that. I'm also trying to find speakers for specific topics to come, because it's something I want to see covered. And the Martinists are something that I'm interested because it's like they overlap in some way, but they're not part of Masonry, unlike so many of our appendant bodies. So I was just wondering if you were familiar with that, but that's more of a footnote for everyone else, that I will get someone to come talk about Martinism and Masonry and where they overlap. I was going to have a speaker on Rosicrucianism and Masonry, and he didn't turn up. We had planned a Zoom, and I ended up just pulling out a paper and giving a talk because the speaker didn't show. And he hasn't replied back to me since then, so I don't know what happened with him. But I'm very interested in Rosicrucianism because I know people who are both. And some, I won't say I could agree with them, some say Rosicrucianism was instrumental in the Grand Lodge of England being formed. So they're responsible for modern Masonry, they claim. That's why I want to get someone to come and give us more deep, because that seems very interesting. That it's one thing to have an appendant body. You're a Mason, you can go be this now because you're a Mason, be a Shriner, be in the chapter, whatever. And you listed off a whole slew of degrees that you can get. I find it fascinating to talk of another, like the Elks, the Moose, the Lions Club, VFW, nothing to do with us. Plenty of Masons are in both. Totally separate bodies, unrelated. I'm more interested in the ones that, like a Venn diagram, they overlap in some way. And so I'm curious as to get more content on that, just to, if they're moving in the same direction we are and we overlap.
So I'll also, I did just post the link to the Tennessee Lodge of Research in the chat and on the Facebook page.
Okay.
Also give a plug. When I was going through the line, we started a program called the Tennessee Academy of Masonic Knowledge, based off of what I'd found in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a program of the same name, but it restricts it only to Pennsylvania Masons. Ours is open to anybody. And it's a level 1, level 2, level 3 kind of deal. And then when you reach the end of it, you can be known as a Tennessee Masonic Scholar, and get a real nice medal for that as well. But it is purely involved with giving papers, reading certain Masonic books and doing a book report on those, all of which get uploaded to our website. And so it's there's been, I think, three or four folks that have finished that program. But part of the reason we did it was to drive content for our in-person meetings, because part of it is you have to give public presentations. And so what better place to do it than at a Tennessee Lodge of Research meeting?
There you go.
But one of the things, Brother Jason, you were talking about that was Brother Schuler, was maybe reason he was going to those the other bodies, the international, connecting Europe with America, and also the different Grand Lodges within the states connection. I just thought about that he was wanting to broaden everybody's or his own knowledge of what Masonry was.
Yeah. And, and the thing about him, the other thing about it, that time, I can't imagine the amount of correspondence he had to have been doing to be able to do what he did.
Exactly.
He had to have been writing letters every single day to somebody to be able to get everything in the position that he was able to do this in.
Well, look out. By comparison, Robert, look what we have to go through just moving our meeting. You and me emailing and calling, and we can go online. We have all of these tools at our disposal. It takes a good deal of dedication and work to put things together like this. I can't even imagine doing what he did with just paper. Writing letters to people, maybe phone calls. I imagine even calling overseas would be prohibitive. Even actually, phones weren't even, phones were.
Well, but also what would be so hard was that, I'm sure there was a push that within the States and also within Europe, that there was not to be really this connection between all these entities. They were so, parental, what's the word I want to say? Parochial or whatever, that they didn't want to share things. And for him to have the guts to try to connect things and finding people who are like-minded at that time to, broaden, Masonry for everyone.
Well,
it's within the fraternity.
And I'll say too, and I know we've got some folks from overseas on, I know Masonry in advancement in Masonry in different countries is much more elongated than it is here.
Yes.
So the fact that he could maneuver past a lot of those issues and a lot of, the issues and the differences and the very kind of protectionist that some folks can be with some of their bodies and things like that is really amazing. The fact that he was able to research and chase down a lot of these dead degrees, I wouldn't know where to begin to look on some of these things. Just putting myself in the mindset of where he was, back in the 20s and the 30s. I will say that the quote unquote beehive of activity that he was a part of, these guys were not slacker Masons, I will say. Some of these guys were grands heads of bodies in various states. He was running with a pretty distinguished group, but the one common accord amongst all the different bodies was him. And he was kind of the one kind of pulling everything along. And so that in of itself, I think is, a testament to him.
Jason?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. David had his hand up. I want to make sure David got a chance to ask a question. And I had a few more. I don't want to.
Yeah, I had my hand up for a couple reasons. One,
Okay,
I do have to run, so I'm going to have to skip out here pretty quickly. But it's interesting the comment you just made, Brother Hicks, because the question or the comment I was going to make is much of what you've said reminds me of a paper that I wrote a few years ago for the Ohio Lodge of Research about a man by the name of Nelson Williams. He was Most Worshipful Brother. He was Grand Master of Ohio. But he was also the presiding grand officer of every mainstream grand appendant body in the U.S. at some point in time. And he was the grand secretary of several of them simultaneously. While, by the way, he was also the secretary of his home lodge.
What's his name?
Nelson Williams. Williams. But the interesting thing was he was the Grand Master in 1898. He passed away in 1944. In that time, after he was Grand Master, I believe he was the official foreign correspondent, Masonic correspondent for the Grand Lodge of Ohio for like 20 or 30 years. I find it absolutely impossible that these two men did not know one another and did not cross paths. I was curious if that name ever popped up in your research.
It
that
did
you remember.
Not that I remember. But I will tell you a lot of names. There are a lot of names that I ran across that did not necessarily stand out for any particular reason because I didn't know them. I put my email in the chat. If you could send me a copy of that paper, I'd love to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me.
Well, just to piggyback on what David, I had several questions left. What about William Moseley Brown? Did his name come up, Jason? Because
No, I do feel like I did see that name.
he was Grand Master. He was, ties in what David said. William Moseley Brown was Grand Master, Grand Commander, Grand High Priest in Virginia at various times, I think. And he helped found several of the bodies with J. Raymond Shute. And I've seen papers on him too. So I say the intersection comes around, but he was most prolific as well.
Now that name does sound familiar. I was trying to flip through my paper real quick and see if I could find his name because that name does. Yeah. So in regards to Allied Masonic Degrees, in July of 1933, a committee consisting of J. Raymond Shute and William Moseley Brown journeyed to Norway, Maine.
Yep.
Where they absorbed the Allied and Christian degrees into the Grand Council of AMD.
Yep.
So
I don't want in any way to take away from Shute, but I'm saying William Moseley Brown was doing much the same thing, and he was here in Virginia, and they coordinated on quite a few endeavors together. That's all I was trying to get to. So the two names come up together in different papers, and that's I find that like. Well, I mean, it's only natural. One guy writes a paper on this, and we had a paper that A. Douglas Smith Lodge published on Brother Shute that we've published in our weekly papers because we're doing A. Douglas Smith's as well as Virginia research. And I'm waiting on the other three lodges to share their repositories with us so we can send them out weekly. I'm eventually going to run out of ours. But yeah, I wanted to bring up Brown because he was involved. I'm sure they were traveling buddies quite a bit.
Actually, in Night Masons, while we're on that topic, he was also, he was the Providential Senior Grand Knight of the original Providential Grand Council of Night Masons in the United States.
And they deserve a paper on their own. I was going to ask about Blue Friars. I'm trying to remember looking at my notes here. I think, do you know anyone who is familiar with the Blue Friars who might be willing to give a talk or something? I've heard them come up several times, and maybe you can help me find someone who could talk about the Blue Friars. I think they deserve a paper on their own, and maybe we could find someone who could talk about them. Maybe a member. I don't know.
I'm looking up right now the active friars list.
Mm-hmm.
So Piers Vaughn out of New York is one of the most recent members. I know he's done a number of things. Christopher Hodap from Indiana.
We know him.
There is
Freemasonry for Dummies.
There is a Virginia Mason, Sean Iyer.
Yes, I know him.
He went in.
I know a Blue Friar.
Kirk McNulty from Virginia.
Yep.
And Mark Tabbert from Virginia.
I don't want to say somebody died who hadn't died. I thought Kirk McNulty died. There was someone.
He could have died, and they just haven't updated this.
Yeah, there was someone that I just published a paper on them, and again, intersectionality. It came up either, I think, in a Zoom meeting or something where somebody brought him up. A prolific, I'd have to go and do a little digging. Someone who had written a number of actual books as well as done research papers, and he was well known. He's out of California. I do think it was McNulty, but I don't want to say for sure. And then someone had asked me if he was still alive, I think in a Zoom meeting, and I went to look into it. And like a month later, he passed. After someone asked me the question, I said, no, as far as I know, he's still alive. And like a month or two later, it passed. So he might have been very sick, and that's what they heard.
Also, you've got Richard Fletcher out of Maryland, Brent Morris out of Maryland,
of course.
Rex Hutchins. Well, Rex Hutchins,
Rex
Arizona.
just passed, sadly. Yes, Rex Hutchins just passed.
Art De Hoyos is also a member.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, I definitely recognize most of those names. I wanted to ask or make a comment. I think, well, anyway, I'll just say it. All of the things you mentioned, all of these appendant bodies, I think, if I'm not mistaken, all of them are on the York Rite side of the aisle.
Yeah.
These are all York Rite. And it made me wonder, it's like, I had to think about it because the Scottish Rite doesn't really have a lot of appendant bodies. I'm not going to say they have none, but because of the way the Scottish Rite is structured, where here are the degrees, and there's 29 of them, and it's very well organized, and it is. We talk quite a bit about the fact we're a top-down hierarchy. One of the parts I take part in the we do the KCCH investiture every 2 years here in Virginia, the Red Hats, and I'm on the team that our valley did it 1 year, and we've been doing it every 2 years since then, because instead of rotating, they say, well, Norfolk can do it again. So we're kind of the permanent KCCH team, which is fine. I enjoy the privilege of doing it, but I do the order part, and I talk about the hierarchy, how Freemasonry, how Scottish Rite is a hierarchy. It is very much a top-down group. So I think the Scottish Rite isn't really receptive to letting appendant bodies with their own governing bodies be a part of them. Whereas the Royal Arch or the York Rite, it's sort of like we have the chapter, we have the council, everywhere but here, and the commandery. And then we have billions of little spin-off York Rite bodies that you must be in the Royal Arch, you must be in the Royal Arch and the council, you must be in the commandery, you must be a past this to get into that. The York Rite just seems to spin off all of these little appendant bodies, and they all have international bodies in charge of them. It's quite a different arrangement. You know what I mean? Quite a different one.
And frankly, it's dizzying. I mean, I can remember being a young Mason and folks mentioning all these different bodies. And I was just trying to figure out where the heck everything fit in.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what exactly they do, which can also somewhat be a little bit perplexing on some days.
Right.
But it's, it's impressive. But yeah, no, it's very much York Rite driven with all these different bodies. And Shute had, I may not have mentioned it, I want to say, I think Shute was a grand head of one of the York Rite bodies. But I would have to, I don't see it standing out to me. I'm pretty positive he was a grand head of either the chapter or the council here in North Carolina.
Yeah. There was a member of my lodge, Ocean View, Bob Oman, Robert Melvin Oman, who was a past Grand Commander. It's funny, I've known personally more past Grand Commanders than any other Grand. I mean, I've met every Grand Master every year, and occasionally they're from our neck of the woods. I knew personally, I don't know, at least 7 or 8 guys, brothers who were past Grand Masters, who I knew from being in a lodge with them, and then come and find out, oh, he was Grand Master and Grand Commander in this year or whatever. So I know a lot of past Grand Commanders. It just worked out that way. But Bob Oman belonged to everything on the York Rite side, virtually everything. And, in lodge, you stand up and say, will all heads of appendant bodies please rise? Every year, and Bob passed 10, 15 years ago, I guess now, but every year Bob would stand up and he would be the head of something else that we had never heard of. He was always any of these little elite little Masonic bodies and they're all on the York Rite side, all of them, that you can get, and most of them you had to be invited into. And it was just kind of the running joke is like, what is Bob Oman head of now? And we had the reputation when people talk about Ocean View, they said, oh, Bob Oman's lodge. So he was one of those guys that everyone knew. Well, I finally got in a little dig on him. Now, Bob was he's retired, like me, a fellow Marine. He was retired He was a retired sergeant major. I was just a little semi-retired lance corporal after 4. But Bob was a retired sergeant major. And the running gag was he joined the commandery, so he finally had a chance to wear a chief's uniform. Which was really good. But I remember Bob stood up, and one of the last things he was head of before he got sick and passed is he stood up and said, heads of offended bodies. And Bob stands up and says, I am the preceptor of the York Rite, blah, 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 5, 6 words in the title of the group he's in. And he sits down. I think I was master at the time. So I said, well, Bob, that's quite impressive. I mean, you've been a Mason forever. You're a past Grand Commander. You've been head of virtually every York Rite body that exists. I got to tell you, it's taken you 50 years to be a preceptor. Preceptor was my first job in DMLA. Because of course DMLA has the 7 preceptors. Well, that's an easy. That's what you give the new kid. I mean, it took you that long just to get it. I don't know. I thought it was hilarious. I don't know. And I mean, you stick around long enough, you see all these titles get recycled. Was the whole joke. I mean, we got all our titles from Scottish Rite. So, preceptor and prior are 2 big parts in like the 32nd and whatever. So, but that was fun to get him a little bit like preceptor. Anyway, but he was one of those guys, though. I mean, he probably deserves to have a paper written about him for all of he's done over the years, because he was member of so many different things. And it blows me away how many little York Rite bodies there are out there. And I guess the question is, what do they really do? What do any of these if you're a research body, you're at least sharing papers. You're preserving a degree. AMD preserves degrees and does research.
Yeah. So
but I wonder, what do they do? What do you do in these bodies?
So that's kind of a hard question that I've always had with some of these bodies, as I've been members of some of them, is other than putting on the degrees, it's kind of questionable sometimes what they do.
Right.
But a lot of them have some charity connected to them. So there is that. York Rite College has an education component attached to it, Knight Adept of the Temple, which
and just to be clear, York Rite College and College of Rites are 2 completely separate groups.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They both have college in the name, but okay. All right.
Yeah.
They have college and Rite in the name.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so it's got a little bit, it's got an educational component to it. AMD, every AMD chapter is a little bit different. The one that I was head of in Chattanooga, Tennessee, we did, instead of doing papers, we did debates. So, cool. We moved to a Super Saturday format, 2 years ago now. You have AMD, Knight Masons, York Rite College, and ACON all on the same day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Have a lunch in there, then have a festive board that evening.
I like that idea.
So that it much more efficiently uses everybody's time. But we did debates. So we did 3 of those meetings a year. So we would do, we'd pick a topic. For example, somebody would be the pro of doing 1-day classes for all 3 degrees, and somebody would be the con to that. Another month it was females in masonry.
Wow.
Another one. And so there was all kinds of topics that we did that way. Never produced a paper on it, but had the discussion. And each side would do a pro and con twice, and then would open it up to the body for questions or comments or responses, and do that over the course of about an hour or so. And really got some interesting opinions. We talked about, should we slow progression down, take it more of like a European model. Is it too much that you can become a third degree Mason, within 3 months in some jurisdictions? Is it too much that you can become a Master Mason in 1 day in some jurisdictions?
Well,
so,
not through your own effort.
Yeah.
In that case.
And so that was our format, which produced a lot of very interesting discussion. And then this year, the Sovereign has decided we are going to do papers on the individual AMD degrees to actually explore the degrees so the membership actually understands. So all of them take a little bit of a different flavor. It's kind of one of those things that if the members or the leadership has been exposed to other things, they might refocus efforts. But that is, I think that's what Brother Shute would want us to do, kind of refocus our efforts and kind of understand why we're doing things versus just showing up, putting on a ritual out of a book and then going home.
And eating and then going home.
Yeah.
We have to eat.
Always eating.
I would say, Jason, if I could, I think what we have here is an excellent platform if we wanted to do a kind of debate. And I've thought about doing that, is picking a topic and lining up a couple of speakers to come in. I'd be happy to, I'd rather moderate and just get it that you and Kurt, maybe, I don't know, or someone, get two brothers who are well-versed on the topic and would put together and have a pro and con. I think that could be interesting because there are a lot of things that come up in Masonry, the 1 day conferrals and all that.
Well,
I think that'd be beneficial. And this is an easy forum to set that up,
Well, and with every state being their own sovereign, you have a lot of things that are very slightly different between the states.
Right.
Which makes it super interesting to kind of explore, just a little bit more. So no, I would love to participate in one of those. Just
okay,
just let me know and we can talk about topic and stuff like that.
I tried. I do try, like I said at the beginning here, I try to have variety. I know this has been one of our more, to use a modern parlance, this is one of our more meta meetings where I'm talking more about the meeting than the meeting itself. But really, I'm always, I guess I'm kind of talking out loud to everybody. This is my therapy. This is me talking out loud about what I'm doing, where we're going with this and where I want to see this thing go. And I try to have variety. I have not had a panel discussion in a bit, but we've had several. I don't know if you've gone back and watched the old ones. One of our first ones was, I called it the Boys from Brazil. It was 3 Brazilian Masons. And as luck would have it, whenever I plan these panel discussions, I don't do it on purpose, but I always get the perfect mix. All 3 of these brothers who I just met, they all signed up for the research paper. And that's part of the reason I asked for what jurisdiction you're from, so I can do these things. They all belong to different grand bodies in Brazil. Huh. So when I interview, and it's basically, I interview them as, to get an idea of what it's like being a Mason in Brazil. How long you're meeting, where are your meetings? What do you wear to them? What are your dues? How long does it take to go through the degrees and all of that? Just stuff that just to contrast and compare to Virginia. And I'm taking Virginia as kind of a typical American Grand Lodge in relation to the rest of the world. I think that's reasonably fair. And just to get a feel for how they do things there. And I just basically interview them for like an hour. And that's a totally different format than like today, where you came in, you give a paper. And I try to mix things up a bit and have these panel discussions from time to time. So it's not just one guy. Jason's going to come talk about Shute. As good as these are, I like the variety of things.
Have you ever had Sean Bradshaw or Ben Wallace on?
I have not. Don't know them.
So this is a book they wrote about a year ago, maybe, called A Path to Providence. It talks about the creation of the Middle Chamber program that North Carolina has.
Yeah, actually, Brother Matt Parker was our guest speaker last week
Ah,
2 weeks ago. In fact, I'm sorry he wasn't here today, because he's a member of several bodies, but we talked about the Lodge of Research that doesn't exist anymore, and they have sort of informal things. But I was hoping he might be here. He brought that up. There's the fellow from Texas who comes to North Carolina to help put it on. So that was well researched. Kurt, I think you guys remember that guy. That's where you go in and you talk to the junior warden, senior warden, worshipful master. You're the only one in the room, but you're having a conversation with yourself. And it was kind of a different take on the chamber of reflection, because it's for current Masons, but in the same vein. And that was a very interesting talk we had. So yeah, a lot of people, we talked about that quite a bit. I think there definitely is an interest in that. And
we talking about, as a result of that, I got in a talk with an older gentleman up here in Winchester, works for Loki Voigt, and he was like saying, "Whoa!" He said, "That's only for commandery. We can't do that in Blue Lodge here."
Right.
It's like, we don't want to do that. That's kind of bizarre to do in a Blue Lodge. That's okay for commandery. And I'm like, okay, I said, I just brought the topic up that we've been talking about it.
That's one of the things that we've gotten. Those who are looking to do observant lodge stuff up here in Virginia, they run afoul of the Grand Lodge. That's what I was kind of joking earlier about. I got to be careful how much I promote an idea here, because I don't want to get slapped down for just talking about stuff. But yeah,
that's understandable.
The opposition to chamber of reflection in Virginia is it's very well known. So that's not something I see evolving here anytime soon.
Interesting. Nah. Well, I've got to run, gentlemen.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm being summoned to take over baby duty. So
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to go and mention our last. You can stick around to hear this part if you want. Next meeting is March the 4th, and Brother Austin Schifrin will be our guest speaker, talking about the Chamber of Reflection, mortality, morphology, and meaning. So more of an examination of how the Chamber of Reflection works. So in that same vein, that's on March the 4th, and everybody's leaving. But for those of you on YouTube, that's our next one coming up, and we have our meeting in person next Saturday, the 25th, and we have a great speaker, Brother Dan Schumann. Yeah, Daniel Huffman will be speaking on esotericism, the double-edged sword of Freemasonry. So those of you in the Virginia area or who are willing to drive, Brian, hop on a boat. We are happy to see you there. That's going to be next Saturday, the 25th, at 10 a.m. So if you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Brian or Robert, do you have any parting words to say to everyone before we wrap it up?
No, just, it's going to be, I think it's going to be an interesting year or 2 years. It's going to be an interesting 2 years, and I'm looking forward to.
Oh, me too. I'm glad that you and I are on the same page, and I can help you. You're helping advance the ideas I'm coming up with and trying to get them rolling your year, so I don't have to try and get it done when I master. That's my whole goal, is let's get some of these ideas, get traction on them, because I have a lot of cool ideas for
without getting slapped by the Grand Lodge.
Yes, we will thread that needle carefully. And if you don't see me anymore, then if this is no longer the Virginia Research Lodge unstated meeting and it's just me, then you'll know why. But anyway, I say that jokingly, but there is stuff going on. So, and this is a public forum, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you, brothers, for attending. Anybody got anything to say before we wrap it up? Thank you, Brian, as always, for being my co-host. Thank you all for sticking around, all 6 of you. That was a very good talk. I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, it was.
You all take care, and I'll see you all. I'll see Robert in a week, and I'll see the rest of you all in 2 weeks. You all take care.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.